Hey guys, we have a fantastic conversation coming up. In fact, it was so great that it happened to run a bit long and I had to split it into 2 episodes. So part one is going to air today and part two will air next week. Now, on with the show. Welcome to the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and I'm so excited that you're here. The Plan B CRNA podcast is the only show made specifically for nurse anesthetists who are exploring options outside of their traditional career paths. This is the place to expand your mind and your goals as we uncover new ways to produce side income together. Join me for some honest, unscripted discussions with other CRNAs who are transforming their financial lives. This episode is brought to you by On-Call Capital. On-Call Capital is dedicated to educating CRNAs and other healthcare providers about investing outside of the traditional stock market. On-Call Capital also provides opportunities for you, yes, you, to create passive income and generational wealth while also lowering your taxable income through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. If you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure you do that right now so that you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for joining me today. And now, on with the show. Welcome to another Provider Spotlight episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. I'm your host, Bobby Jones, and my guest today is a pharmacist who has waded into the real estate space and found a lot of success in a relatively short period of time. Dr. Stephen Nguyen graduated from pharmacy school in 2013, and from 2013 to 2017, he focused on paying off over $250,000 in student loans. And after paying off these massive loans, he started investing in real estate while working full-time, and he's now scaled his portfolio to 90 units without any partners. It's great to have you here on the show today, Stephen.
Hey, thanks for having me on. It's funny when you said that I went from $250,000 of student debt to $12 million in real estate debt. Kind of ironic.
Yeah. Oh, that is, and I think it goes to show you how there's good debt and there's bad debt, and not that student debt is necessarily bad debt, but, it does pay off in your career with earning potential, but it's not always the same for everybody. So, well, let's start there. Tell me a little bit about your career. How did you settle on becoming a pharmacist?
Yeah, so I actually graduated pharmacy school. It took me 5 years out of high school. I went to an accelerated program that was 2 years of undergraduate and then 3 years of pharmacy school. So on average, it takes around 8 years. So people are doing their, 4 to 5 year bachelor's degree and then 4 years of pharmacy school, but it was an accelerated program. And the interesting thing is when I graduated high school, I was actually pretty well-rounded. I applied to multiple different programs, nursing, pharmacy, pre-med, engineering, software engineering. But at the time when I was 18, I just thought, well, in 5 years, I could graduate as a pharmacist and make six figures. And back then I thought that was a crazy amount of money. I mean, to an 18-year-old, six figures seemed like once you made that, you can coast for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
So I chose that route due to kind of more of the stability of healthcare. It's a very stable job. It doesn't really go up much in pay over the years, which is kind of hurting as of late. But, maybe 10, 15 years ago, with the current wages, it's pretty strong. So it's just very stable. And I think I always just had the inclination of wanting to help people. So naturally, it would kind of gravitate towards healthcare and, medical school is way longer and even more student debt. So I just thought, the happy medium was becoming a pharmacist.
Yeah. Well, and now you've been in the career field for 10 years and you've done quite a lot in that last 10 years, so let's talk first about the problem that a lot of people face when they get done with any kind of degree, and that's student debt. You had a ton of student loans, 250,000 plus. How in the world did you pay off all of that in 4 years?
Yeah. So, like most programs, you get the federal loans. And for reference, the interest rates are about 7 to 8%. I just looked it up in 2023. It's actually been the same for the past 10 years. But, obviously 7 to 8%. And for some context, when I was getting the student loans, mortgage rates were around 4%. So it was a little bit less. But basically what I did was after graduating, I just created a plan. It's very simple. When I became a pharmacist I think my first job, I started making around $120,000. I maintained my same exact college lifestyle. I
Mm-hmm.
did not lifestyle creep at all. After I graduated, I had to relocate out of my hometown. I was just renting a room for about $500 a month. And
Oh.
my take home was roughly around $5,000 a month at $120,000. So I had a $4,500 spread initially.
Mm-hmm.
And, once you kind of graduate and you don't lifestyle creep at all, you're able to save a lot of money. It's very tempting to, once you graduate, you want to buy a new car, you
Mm-hmm.
want to buy a nice house, you want to go on fancy vacations, you want to, buy a nice watch. And, we can afford that as a
Mm-hmm.
pharmacist, making that type of salary. But I just really kept my expenses low and I still maintain that college mentality. And it's very easy because you're used to just living with roommates, your whole career, and just kind of maintaining that as long as possible helps you lay a foundation for wealth.
Yeah.
So the first strategy was really keep expense low. The second strategy I did was actually refinanced my student loans. So I lowered it from 8% down to 3%.
Mm.
So that 5% margin was huge, right?
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
terms
That's
of your
that's
costs.
really huge.
Yeah. So I did that. And then basically I just saved, X amount of money per month. And I would just automate extra payments on a
Mm-hmm.
monthly basis to my student loan. So
Yeah.
I don't remember the exact amount, but let's just say the minimum amount was $1,000. I would automate maybe $3,000 or $4,000 a
Mm-hmm.
month in there. So I just did that, put my head down for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just did that. And naturally my income increased as I started to job hop a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But despite increasing my income from, let's say, 120 to 170,000, I still maintain that same lifestyle, same expenses.
Yeah.
And my new job, I was able to actually live at home for a little bit. So that helped me save even more, where I basically
Sure.
the living expense, which is your largest expense. So literally I was spending maybe $1,000 a month on just food going out. I was probably taking home around $8,000
Mm-hmm.
at that point. So I had a $7,000 a month, savings spread.
Yeah. Now, were you being at all to any retirement accounts during that time, or was it primarily, hey, I got to get the student debt taken care of first?
No, great question. So my first job didn't offer a 401k, so I didn't
Oh.
do that. But my second job, I did actually max out my 401k, which is around $19,000 a year.
Okay.
So I would actually max that out. I built up a little emergency fund of,
Mm-hmm.
maybe like $10,000 just in case something happens.
Mm-hmm.
And then anything beyond that basically was dumped into student loans.
Yeah. Okay.
For
Great.
me, that's all I knew was at the time when I graduated pharmacy school was debt was bad.
Mm-hmm.
So all I knew was to pay off student loans as fast as possible to be free of it.
Yeah. So, and then after you paid that off, that's when you got the fancy car and the nice watches and all that stuff, right?
No, actually,
Sorry, I had to throw that out there because that's what most people do. That's what most people do.
no, it's funny you say that because I have the same car in 2013 till today. The same
Mm.
exact car that I've had. I was fortunate where my parents actually bought me a used car after I graduated. It was a used BMW, and I've been driving the same car, ever since. So I have not actually upgraded cars just yet.
Hmm.
But, a lot of my classmates, Tesla's very popular right now in
Oh
California,
yes.
Bay Area, Los Angeles now, and maybe even where you're at. But every pharmacist that reports to me has a Tesla. So just keep that in context. All the
Yeah.
pharmacists that report to me, I'm a pharmacy director right now, they all own nicer cars than me.
Yeah. Yeah. But you decided instead to get into real estate. So what was it that turned you on to the real estate space? I mean, you live in California. The real estate is very different there than in other parts of the country. So what turned you on to the real estate space and where is it that you're actually investing?
Yeah. So, I would say, my parents don't really have a background in real estate. My parents are immigrants here from Vietnam, and they just had the mentality of you buy a house that you live in, and eventually you pay off that house.
Hmm.
So that's why it was really ingrained to me, pretty early on to like number one, save money, but number two, pay off debt and never have debt.
Hmm.
That was kind of their mindset. But, for me, that's why when I graduated 2013 to 2017, all I knew was pay off my student debts. But the
Hmm.
moment I paid off 2017, I said, what's the next step for me? And the natural next step for everybody, in healthcare is I want to buy a house to live in for myself. I don't want to
Hmm.
live at home anymore. I want to branch off and live in my own place. So, because I was able to save up a lot of money every year, because I think I was putting in around $60,000-$70,000 a year
Mm.
to my student loans. I just took that $67,000 and saved it for a down payment on a house. So actually, the first house that I got into was in the Bay Area. For those who don't know, the average cost of a house in the Bay Area is $1 million, even back in
Mm.
2017. So I just said, okay, where I grew up, houses were $1 million. What's the city over? The city over was Pleasanton. It's $1 million there. It's too expensive. What's the city after that? Dublin.
Hmm.
That's $1 million too expensive. What's the city after that? It's Livermore. That was under $1 million. So I
Okay.
just said, that's in the path of progress. So that's where I started to invest. So first house I got into was $800,000. I put 10% down. So that's $8,000 down. So it took me
Hmm.
about a little over a year to save for that. And what I did was I lived in the master bedroom and I would rent out the 3 other bedrooms in the house for
Yeah.
$1,000 each to people on a month-to-month basis. So I was able to get $3,000 a month, and that actually covered my mortgage.
Yeah.
But I just had to cover the utilities, the property tax, the insurance, and the HOA. So that ended up making my living expense to be $1,500 a month in the Bay Area,
Mm.
which is insane, right?
Yeah,
The Bay
that's really
rent
reasonable.
rent is, minimum, 2,500 in the Bay Area. If you're living in San Francisco, one bedroom is $4,500.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I just thought it was crazy that I can live for $1,500 a month. I had to give up some privacy, obviously, having 3 roommates, but I still had that college mentality where I just was used to having roommates
Yeah. Yeah.
at all times. So that's kind of how I got started, with my first property. It was just wanting for a place for me to live, and I just subsidized my cost by renting out the other rooms that I wasn't using.
Yeah. No, I love the whole house hacking idea. It's fantastic for people who are just out of school. Maybe they don't have, a spouse and kids and all that kind of stuff. And it really can work out very nicely for covering expenses. And so that's awesome. And I mean, did you come across that idea in any particular place, or was it just something that you kind of thought about and said, "Hey, this kind of makes sense. I should try this." Like, how did that idea pop in your head?
Yeah, so I actually never really listened to any like YouTube videos or podcasts about real estate until 2019, actually.
Mhm.
So at the time when I was growing up in my parents' house, my parents would always rent out one room in that house.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in a 5-bedroom house and, we had a couple of spare bedrooms.
Mhm.
So the downstairs one was always rented out to some other tenant. And my parents weren't good at the computer, so I always had to do it. Like I would put the ad on Craigslist for
Oh, yeah.
them, and then they would respond via email. They would just say, "Hey, call this number," and it would just be the number of my mom and dad or
Mhm.
dad. So I just was kind of involved. So for me, I just thought, oh, like I've seen it before. I'm kind of used to it, and I'm used to living around people. So I just said, okay, well, let me do the same, and it'll help subsidize my costs, right? So in 2017, when I got my first house, I became a pharmacy director. So my
Yeah.
income bumped up again. My living expense went from free at home to $1,500 a month. But
Mhm.
keep in mind that 1,500 is going to my equity, right?
Yeah,
Of my
yeah,
house. So
exactly.
in reality, it's not really 1,500. It's essentially going back to me.
Mhm.
And yeah, that's just how I really just got started. And that's all I kind of knew at the time.
Yeah. Now you said you only put 10% down on the house. What kind of a loan, not to get too in the weeds, but a lot of the loans you see are, 20% down. So how did you get a hold of one that was 10% down?
Yeah, so since it's a primary residence, you don't have to down, the typical 20-25%.
Mhm.
So you can actually get away with like, sometimes 5 to 10%.
Mhm.
But you get to pay something called private mortgage insurance or PMI for short.
Mhm.
But what a lot of people don't know is the PMI ends up being like maybe $250 a month.
Mm.
But if that can save me from having to down another 10%, which is $80,000.
Yeah.
And then, like I'd rather take that any day. Like if I can save $80,000 of a down payment and just pay $250 extra a month, I'm fine with that. And what a lot of people don't know is after like 2, 3 years, once your house appreciated naturally, California is a crazy appreciation market. You can
Mhm.
just call the lender, they'll reassess your property at the higher value. If the value went up, you can remove the PMI.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of people don't know that. So I didn't let it kind of deter me away from it. My parents were always like, "You had to down 20% because they were afraid of the PMI." But I just said, "Well, let me look at what this PMI looks like." And it
Mhm.
was only $250 a month. I just said, "This is not much. Like I can take the hit. I'm making a good W-2 salary. It's
Yeah.
not." or break me. I'd rather just get into that real estate today earlier and end up paying dividends, looking back today.
Yeah.
I appreciated. I think I bought for 800. It's worth 1.3 now. So
Oh,
it's
okay. Yeah.
like $500,000. So I think, would you pay $250 a month for PMI to have an asset that appreciate 500,000? I think everyone would say yes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that assessment there. So that's awesome. So, but again, you didn't stop there. So next you bought a true rental property, I'm assuming?
No, so actually I house hacked for 3 years straight.
Oh,
um,
okay. Okay.
Believe it or not. So I repeated the process. I job hopped to
Gotcha.
another job, and it was in San Francisco. And I did the same thing. I bought a house for 10% down. They actually had a loan product where I didn't have to pay PMI
Mhm.
through US Bank at the time. And, it was $1.1 million house. I put, roughly $100,000 down and repeated the same thing. That house was kind of like a makeshift duplex. That's kind of more common in San Francisco, where you can have an upper unit and a lower unit, and the lower unit had its own separate entrance. So I did the same thing. I rent out the lower unit. I lived in the master bedroom upper unit and rent out the two other rooms. So I basically repeat that process, I think 2 more times
Mm.
in California. And it took me probably around a year and a half between each house when I bought it. So I was able to save for those down payments because, my income was going up naturally.
Mhm.
My expense stayed the same. I was renting out rooms. And on top of that, once I left one house, I would just rent out the previous house,
Mhm.
right? So once I
Yeah.
moved out of this house, I would rent it out. In California, at best, you'll break even or be slightly negative
Yeah.
because the rent earn is great relative to your monthly mortgage. But since I was working a W-2, I could take the hit. But once I hit number three, I kind of realized, wait a second, like I can't sustain this forever because if I'm constantly negative, whatever, $400 a month on each property,
Yeah.
I'm tied to my day job, forever. So that's what led me kind of to my pivot to out of state as well as to apartment complexes.
Okay. So let's talk about that because that's a whole different ball of wax. So you started looking outside of the state of California. How different were the numbers for you with what you were seeing?
Yeah, it's so at first, like most people, we invest in our backyard because we know it, we're comfortable with it, right? Like I grew up in a single family home in California. My parents, I think, owned one rental when I was growing up. They didn't really talk much about it, but I just kind of remember seeing it. So, you can't do what you're comfortable with, right? So that's why I started off investing in single family homes in California. But I just said, you know what? Let me try to look out of state, see what the numbers look like. And, my cousin was actually an aerospace engineer and he was just telling me about Huntsville, Alabama. And I just said, huh, let me look at this market. I'm curious to see what Huntsville, Alabama looks like. And when I did some research, I basically found a brand new build house near Huntsville, Alabama. It was $270,000.
Mhm.
And I think can rent for $2,100. And I just said, wait, that's impossible. Like $270,000 gets me a condo in like San Francisco, like a fixer upper condo in San Francisco,
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
right? But I can own an actual brand new stick built house,
Mm.
built brand new, so there's not gonna be much maintenance issues, and there's a lot of warranty still. And I can rent this out for 2,100, down 25%, and I was gonna cash flow around $70 a month. So I
Mm.
just thought, wow, this is insane. So I literally bought that house sight unseen. I never even been to Alabama.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I just had a good property manager who was also the realtor that they were bringing me these deals and they just said, yeah, we can rent this out for 2,100. And I just ran the numbers and said, you know what? If you find one, I'll make an offer.
Mhm.
And he sent me one. I just wrote an offer and it got accepted immediately because it's new construction. There's no competition. It's first come, first serve.
Yeah.
And that's what kind of broke me out of California and made me kind of move out of state.
Okay. So how many times did you repeat that process with single family homes in Alabama?
Yeah, so it's kind of funny. So right after I bought that out of state single family home, I quickly just learned about apartment complexes and multifamily.
Mhm.
And the moment I learned about multifamily, I was just like, oh my God, I'm never going to buy single family again, unless
Yeah.
it's for me to live in personally. Right. And
Mhm.
the reason for that is once I understood this concept that the value of an apartment complex, so it's five or plus units, five or
Mhm.
more units, it's based on the net operating income divided by the market cap rate. So as you increase the income, which you have fully control of, or you decrease the expense, which you fully have control of, you can force appreciation of the apartment complex. Versus a single family home, it doesn't matter how much rent you're getting. The value is based on what your neighbor's house sells for.
Mhm.
So the example I love to give is, let's just say you have two single family homes. One rents for $5,000 a month. One rents for $10,000 a month. When you go to sell it, they sell at the same price because
Yeah.
they're based on sales comps. Take that same example, $5,000 a month and $10,000 a month for an apartment complex. The one that rents for $10,000 a month is worth double.
Mhm.
So once I understood that, I could have cash flow. The more cash flow I have, the more appreciation I have.
Mhm.
Versus in California, I have zero cash flow or negative cash flow, but I have insane appreciation.
Yeah.
Alabama, single family, I have probably more cash flow, not as much appreciation.
Yep.
So in single family, it's one or the other. With apartments, you have both. I
Mhm.
just thought, wait, I can have my cake and eat it too. So once I learned that, I said, I need to get into apartment complexes.
Yeah.
That's what,
So let's go over your first apartment deal then. What was the size of that property and how did you come across it?
yeah. So, obviously it's very intimidating getting into apartment complexes as a
Mhm.
beginner. When I grew up, I just thought only rich people owned apartment complexes, not some regular, pharmacists working or some middle class, upper middle class W-2, because I just never saw anyone own apartment complexes, right? I don't have any friends, family, acquaintances that own apartment complexes. Only people I know that own it are really wealthy typically.
Mhm.
So, for me, it was just like, okay, like, how do I do this? Like, this is a new asset class. It's going to cost more money. And with apartment complex lending, like, lenders don't take you seriously unless you have experience.
Yep.
You'll typically ask, well, how many apartments have you owned? I can tell them, hey, I own 5 single family homes. They don't care. That doesn't count,
Mhm.
right? That does not count whatsoever. And brokers, they're not going to take you seriously because you have no track record. Brokers, all they care about is getting a commission.
Mhm.
Would they rather bring the deal to someone that they've closed 10 deals with or some brand new beginner who owns 5 single family homes? They're going to pick the guy with a track record.
Mhm.
But after I kind of started listening to like a lot of podcasts, a lot of YouTube videos about, how to, you know, underwrite a multifamily, I quickly realized that all the deals that brokers were bringing me were terrible anyways. Right. I've literally, you can go on LoopNet, you can go on Crexy, look at those deals. They're terrible.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I
Yeah.
only, I only use those platforms to get a gauge of like what they're selling for,
Mhm.
and to help practice underwriting deals. That's all I'm doing it for. But in reality, you're not going to find a good deal in LoopNet. Brokers aren't going to bring you a good deal. Lenders aren't going to take you seriously. So instead of kind of quitting and complaining about it, I just said, you know what? I need to learn how to go off market.
Mhm.
So I actually created a direct mailing campaign where I was mailing out 300 letters a month for about 6 months.
Mhm.
And through those letters, I was able to go direct to owner. And I was able to close on my 2 apartment complexes that I currently own. One's a 26 unit and one's a 20 unit.
Mhm.
And what's kind of crazy is I bought both those apartment complexes with $300,000 equity day one. So
Mhm.
they raised at $300,000 over of what I bought them at. So I was able to buy them, get instant equity day one,
Yeah.
and also have the potential to double the rents
Mhm.
after renovating each unit. So if you know the net operating income divided by market cap rate equation, if I can double the rents, what am I doing? I'm doubling the value of the asset.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that's kind of my first deal. So for numbers of my first deal, it was a 26 unit apartment complex in Oklahoma. I think it was 90% occupied. I think only 2 out of the 26 were vacant.
Okay.
I was getting around $10,000 a month gross day one. The income was roughly, or the expense was roughly around 55%, which is actually accurate, right? Like the
Mhm. Mhm.
expense for smaller apartment complexes are around, 50, 55.
Yeah.
We look at the broker performance, it's always like 35 to 40, which,
Yeah.
it's too little already
Mhm. Yeah.
to they're trying to justify a higher price by doing that. So I knew it was realistic. And then the guy just said, hey, I talked to him back and forth, phone calls,
Mhm.
built that trust. Fortunately, I'm a healthcare professional and you are as well. And naturally, we're kind of more trusted.
Mhm.
Like, I kind of pulled my doctor card a little bit, like I'm Dr. Stephen Nguyen, and it just builds that credibility because I went from a stranger in California sending you a letter to Dr. Stephen Nguyen. It's a different level of trust and a different level of authority in a way where
Yeah.
they like trust you a little bit more. Like, hey, you're in healthcare, like you must be trustworthy. So I kind of helped do that. And I was just very transparent throughout the whole process. I never really hid anything. I just said, hey, I need a T12 profit and loss statement for the past 12 months and a recent rent roll. It's not for me. It's my lender needs it
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to ask for that. And, he was very cordial to work with, which was nice. And he just said, make me an offer. And I just said, okay, well, there's three ways that I basically look at to make an offer. The first is net operating income divided market cap rate, right? So you have the net operating income from the T12, cap rate 7.8 cap in Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
So you
Yeah.
do the math. That's one method. The second is the price per unit. So if it's, let's say, 20K per unit, but the market is 50K per unit, you have a pretty good spread there.
Yeah. Yeah.
The last option is the tax assessed price, which is it's transparent public information. If you look at the county websites in Oklahoma, you can find out what it is. So typically I run all three methods and I take the lowest of the three as my initial offer.
Okay.
So usually that's going to be a tax assessed price. So I literally offer him tax assessed price of $500,000.
Mm-hmm.
And he just accepted it. I was like,
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So I was like, wait, I got a 26 unit apartment complex for $500,000.
Holy crap.
When in San Francisco, it gets me a condo.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm getting $10,000 of gross income a month from this asset. And the rents were only around $450, all bills paid.
Mm-hmm.
Landlord was covering all the utilities, but after all the utilities, it's about 150 each.
Yeah. So you just
300 net to me. I was like, well, if I renovate these units for $10,000 each, I know I can double it to $600 to $700.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, okay, I bought this for $500,000. It appraised at $750,000 day one.
Mm-hmm.
I recame up equity. I'm going to spend $10K per unit to renovate it. So that's maybe $300,000, let's just call it. So I'm all in for $800,000. And it's going to be worth roughly around $50,000 per unit. So that's about $1.3 to $1.4 million.
Mm-hmm.
That was my underwriting about a year and a half ago. But I just saw an apartment complex sell near mine for $65,000 per unit.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Now my apartment's going to be worth around 1.7.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you do a big burr, right? So I bought it for $500,000, put in 300, all in 800,000. It's worth 1.7. Do 75% cash out refinance, pull all my money, get my down payment back, get my renovation costs back, and probably another couple $100,000 on top of that. And you take that money, you go buy another apartment complex. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm doing. I'm still in the renovation phase currently. I think about half are renovated right now, but I'm still kind of like trying to truck along the way to continue renovating all these units.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that is something with apartments. It does take time. The whole, BRRRR method thing is talked about a lot in single family real estate, but it's actually really effective on that multifamily level. And, you can do a lot in a relatively short period of time. Like you said, I mean, in just a year or two, you can have a property that's now appraising for double or even triple the value, depending on what you were able to do with the rents and the expenses. So no, I love this, man. This is fantastic. So, hey there, guys. Thanks for listening to our show today. I hope that you are enjoying it as much as I did. And if so, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give us a 5-star rating and review. Now, don't forget that the second half of this conversation is going to air next Monday. And if you want to reach out to Steven, make sure you check out the show notes for his contact info and his YouTube link. This is Bobby Jones signing off. Until next time, stay safe and take care of each other out there. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Plan B CRNA podcast. If you haven't already subscribed and reviewed the show, I'd be honored if you took the extra time. It really helps to expand our reach and get the word out about the show. If you're a CRNA who is interested in sharing your story on our podcast, I'd love to have you. Please email me at bobby@oncallinvestments.com for more information. This episode was brought to you by OnCall Capital. They are dedicated to helping providers like you develop passive income and generational wealth through investments in the apartment and alternative investment spaces. Feel free to check out their website at www.oncallinvestments.com and subscribe to their free educational email series. You can find OnCall Capital on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can also check out our YouTube page, where you'll find all of the show episodes along with other educational videos. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.